Madam President, I also rise to talk about another key unmet need that's even of broader scope. And as I said a few minutes ago, that is the urgent need between now and the end of the year to pass emergency help for the recent flood victims of Louisiana who were devastated by the consequences of that enormous flood. Madam President, unfortunately, because there were lots of other things in the news at the time when that flooding happened in Greater Baton Rouge and Acadiana, a lot of members, a lot of folks around the nation don't fully appreciate and understand the gravity of that flooding. It was way underreported in the national media. It was way underappreciated and not fully understood by us in the Congress. We've solved some of that in the months since then, but still to this day, so many Americans don't understand the gravity of that flooding. The flooding I'm describing a few months ago in Greater Baton Rouge and Acadiana in Louisiana is the fourth worst natural disaster we've experienced in a decade or more, only behind Hurricane Katrina and Superstorm Sandy and Hurricane Ike, the fourth worst natural disaster by any reasonable metric like FEMA individual assistance. Louisiana had over 114,000 homes with a verified loss, 114,000 homes. Let's do a little comparison to understand the scope of that. In 2016, Missouri had horrendous flooding, very serious flooding, and I certainly supported an appropriate response there. But that was about 2,500 individual registrations. South Carolina had even greater flooding in 2015. That was 26,000 individual registrations. Northern and central Louisiana in March of this year had major flooding. That was 40,000 individual registrations. We're talking 114,000 homes with verified loss. That's comparable to the loss in New York State from Superstorm Sandy. In Superstorm Sandy, there were 124,000 homes with verified loss in New York, about the same number. Again, we're talking about 114,000 homes in Louisiana. Now, that was not all of Superstorm Sandy, just New York. I'm not counting New Jersey. That was another significant number. But that gives you a sense of the magnitude we're talking about. I want to thank all of our colleagues and our colleagues in the House and President Obama for proposing the beginning of an appropriate response. And before we broke for the elections, we did pass significant emergency funding to go beyond the normal help in the Stafford Act and other statutes that pertain to FEMA and related agencies. And about $400 million was sent to the flood victims in Louisiana. But by any metric, that can only be the beginning. And in fact, President Obama at the time and congressional leaders at the time pledged that this would be the beginning and we would come back now and between now and the end of the year finish an appropriate response. I mentioned losses in New York caused by Superstorm Sandy. Just a little more losses on homes flooded than we're talking about in Louisiana, and yet New York received $8.6 billion related to that in emergency CDBG funds. We're not asking for near that amount, but that gives you a sense of the magnitude of the need, and certainly the requests the governor and others from Louisiana, certainly including myself and Senator Cassidy, have put forward is fully justified by the numbers, by the metrics. So I would simply ask all of our colleagues and here in the Senate and all of our colleagues in the House to do the right thing, to look at the facts, to look at the figures, to look at the numbers, and to make the appropriate response as we have in every other disaster previous, as we did in the lesser flooding in South Carolina, as we did in Missouri, as we did certainly with Superstorm Sandy and Ike and Katrina and Rita, etc. No special treatment, just look at the numbers, look at the metrics, do the right thing. Our request from Louisiana is fully in line with that and fully justified by that precedent. It is a serious natural disaster. It was woefully underreported. So it is important that we all learn more about it, focus on it, understand the magnitude of the loss, and ensure that we respond properly and adequately before now and the end of the year. I look forward to continuing to work with all of my colleagues, starting with Senator Cassidy, to do just that. Thank you, Madam President. With that, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.